Okay, so we're discussing arrays, and we saw that arrays are very useful when we need some decision making, like nested decision making. We can search them, and we can use parallel arrays to achieve um, um, uh, some business logics that may require picking a price or other attributes of products and so on. So one of the important things which we need to understand when we are working with arrays, that their size is finite. Okay, and we have to be within the bounds of array. So we should know from where array start and where does it end. Okay, why that's important? Because in array, so arrays are basically represented in a memory as a contiguous memory location. Okay, and depending upon whether the integer is basically of 4 byte or 8 byte, accordingly the memory allocations are being occupied. Okay, and when you compile your program, the size which is being given to the array, accordingly memory is allocated to the program. If you know about different between heap and what was the other one, structure, just forgot the name. There is static memory allocation and dynamic memory allocation. In case of static memory allocation, the size are given at compile time. Okay, in case of this especially in the arrays we are discussing, if we give the size, then size are according to size memory is being allocated. In some languages, they basically, if you go beyond the array indexes, they give you an error. Okay, some languages basically stop execution when you are trying to traverse the array out of their bounds. For example, array size is 6, you can go up to maximum 5th index, and you have given 6th index to retrieve some value. Some languages will give you an out of bound error, whereas some languages will give you some result, like C++. If you give an index out of the range, it will give you some value, and that value you call as a garbage value. So this is sometime, if language does not give you an error, we consider it as a logical error. And being a programmer, it's very important for you, you should understand what are the bounds of your array, and you traverse array within those bounds. Okay, and if your input, if your index which you are using to traverse the array is dependent upon user input, user is giving you some input to traverse to basically retrieve some value from array, then you have to be very careful. For example, in this case, we have an array and we have constant values in this array, which are the basically months, and you ask the user to enter a month number, and everybody knows that months from 1 to 12, and you don't expect user to enter 13 or 14, but user may enter 13 or 14, and if they does, it may result into an error into your program, or it may result some value which is a garbage value. So you have to be very careful when you are traversing arrays in your program. So you should have some validation in your program in order to avoid these scenarios. Okay. So loops are very critical. We have used loops in lab especially, and what loops does, they basically, especially for loop, initialize with a certain value. Then we have one criteria which basically is a condition if it is true or false, and accordingly loop will progress, and we basically increment the variable so that if condition is dependent on loop, it should terminate eventually. And for loops are very convenient for traversing arrays, and we know that every array has subscript. So for loop, in for loop we can initialize a variable I, and we can use it as a subscript to traverse arrays, and for loop we are incrementing that variable as well. And we have to be careful with the bounds as well. So these are the two pseudocode examples of using for loop to traverse arrays. If you look over here, this DEP is a variable, and it goes from 0 to size of array -1. Okay, because we are using this as a subscript index, and index is always especially in VB script language, the size of array, if it is given 6, it means the index will go up to 5. Okay, so that's why it's -1. Important thing is we need to remain in the bounds, and then increment the variable, and we are printing the value which is stored on the specific index of an array. This program is doing the same thing, but there's slight modification in this program, and this program is more efficient than the previous one. Can you spot the difference, and why this program is more efficient, this loop is more efficient than the previous one, than this one? Can you spot the difference, and why the lower one is more efficient than the upper one?
You say it's size -1
Yeah, so over here you're doing you're computing this all the time. Size would be subtracted, one would be subtracted from size, and then condition would be validated whether DEP is less than size. In this case, you basically have a constant variable defined and you're comparing that variable. So that subtraction will not done over here. So that's why it is more efficient over here. And you can see the advantage of using constant, especially when you're working with arrays. The constant variable not only improve maintenance of your program, but also increase efficiency of your loops. So the arrays which we discuss, they are one-dimensional array, okay, and in those arrays you basically use index value to retrieve certain item or retrieve certain value that is being stored on that index, okay. But in real life we know that it's not like that. We always depend upon integer index to save value. It might possible that I have a business logic in which I have to store your student ID and the courses you have taken, a course you have taken. So your ID should be a key value, and against key value I can store some courses. So rather than depending upon index as a value, I need more meaningful key to retrieve the values. So in such scenario we can use associative arrays, okay. And what associative arrays does, we can create our own values. In simple terms, we can create our own indexes, meaningful indexes, okay, the indexes which will make more sense to us. In one dimensional array, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 indexes, subscripts does not make any sense to us, okay. We know that they will give us some value that is located on that index, but they are not meaningful. If you want some meaningful subscripts, then we can use associative arrays, and they are also called as key value pair, okay. If I show you example, it will make sense to you. For example, this is in PHP, we can define an array in which we can give a key which is Peter. Previously it was a subscript 0 to assign a value, but over here I have a name as a key, as a subscript, okay, and to that subscript I assign a value. Peter has an age of 32. Similarly, this is another person has age 33 and another person has age of 34. So this is associative arrays in which the keys are meaningful, okay. And using these keys, this is another way to assign these values, and using these keys you can basically build your logic, and if you want to print it, you simply need to do this $ages, and then you can provide the key which is meaningful to you, and it can give you the result. You don't need to worry about index anymore. The index itself is meaningful, okay. In previous cases you need to know whether it's index or 4 or 5 or 3, okay. In case of prices you need to know the specific index. In this case it doesn't matter because the key is meaningful, and using that key you can retrieve the specific values, okay. So this is associative array. You can define in this fashion, okay, and this is another way you can define and assign values, okay. And this echo statement will basically print like this. W3 school website basically provides some more information on this, so you can go and look at that link. So in ASP.NET also associative arrays are available, okay, and this is the namespace which provides you some collection classes, okay, that you can use to store objects. Dictionary is one class, okay, and you can create new dictionary, and then you can add items in that dictionary. So what dictionary does, this is basic class, and it takes into account key value pair, okay. And these basically, again, this is a syntax of C#. These basically define the data type of those key value pair. So in this case both will be string. So this is the key, the subscript, and this is the value, subscript and value. And if I response.write using this subscript, it will give me this value. So this is one way you can achieve same functionality in ASP.NET using C#. You can also in this namespace you also have classes that can define list, and you can see in these cases we don't need to define the size. So these are using heap data structure in which dynamically memory is being allocated as you add new objects to this list. So this is a list of data type int, and this is list name, and this is how you define a list, okay. And then you can add elements into the list. So in C# assessment you can use dictionary and list in order to build your logic. You can find more examples on this link. So those are basically associative arrays. We can create multiple dimensional arrays as well. Okay, as your fellow student mentioned initially, that the business logic which we were discussing before, it can be done with 2-dimensional logic. Okay, you can create 3-dimensional logic arrays as well, 4-dimension and so on. Okay, so in that case, for example, when we create 2-dimensional array, then each index, for example, in this case I have 2-dimensional array, and in first dimension of array, all the elements will be holding reference to another array. Okay, so this element, which is index 0, will be holding a reference or address or pointer to another array. Okay, and using that information we can access the values in that array. In order to understand this multidimensional array, you can think of matrix. I'm sure you must have done matrix calculation when you were in year 10 or 12. Okay, matrix basically represent data in rows and columns. So in this case, this 2-dimensional array is depicted as follows over here. So array A index 0 0 basically represent this column, this cell in memory. Okay, array 0 1 represent this space in my memory. Okay, so using 2-dimensional array, if you can visualize them well, then you can assign values to these arrays which are basically holding the value, and the first dimensional array is only holding reference to all these arrays. Okay, so this way we can define 2-dimensional array. If you define 3-dimensional array, then this index will basically hold reference to another array, which will be, so this is holding address of this one, this array, and this is holding address of this array. So you can understand this fashion that how things are managed. Okay, eventually the last array is holding the value. The previous indexes of arrays are just holding the reference. Okay, and in this case you can create multiple dimensional arrays. In PHP, this is a syntax you can follow to create multiple dimensional array. So within this array we are defining another array, and the identifier of that array is Griffin, and Griffin basically holds these two values. This is second dimension of first array. So this one, and this one, these are indexes of first array, and over here indexes are meaningful. Okay, like associative array, but we are extending that associative array to become a multiple dimensional array, and these are the second dimensions of that array. Okay, in order to access the values, again you have to first of all refer to the key of first dimension. Okay, in this case, for example, it's a Griffin over here, and then you can refer to the index on which you have saved value. So over here we use the indexes rather than meaningful key value. You can use meaningful key values over here as well. Okay, but this is how you access the values, and you can use them in your program. And in similar way you can assign values as well. Okay, this is example of 2-dimensional array in C#. Okay, using the data type we can define array. This is how we define array. So this shows that this is 2-dimensional array, and this tells basically size. Okay, you can directly assign values to the indexes by giving the values. For example, this is array 0 first index, and so on. And you can also use loops to assign these values, and you can use these loops to basically print those values as well. So the outer loop you can consider as the number of rows. Okay, if there are 3 rows, I will go to up to 3, and the inner loop you can consider as a columns. Okay, depending on number of columns you can set your j value. Then array ij will basically will print each and every index of that array. Okay, if it's 3-dimensional array, then you will need another loop, which will be you can k. If it's 4-dimensional array, you will need another loop. Okay, and so on. And you can use these loops to assign a value and to retrieve a value. Before I end, I just show you the example which are uploaded on the blackboard. So this is one of the example dynamic array in C#. It is uploaded on the blackboard. Okay.
Before you go on to that, what happens to the other elements in that 2-dimensional array that you haven't initialized?
They will not print anything. Okay.
It'll just be whatever's in memory.
In C sharp, it may give you, it will just does not print anything. Just try and do it and see what does happen. Because nothing is being given, nothing will happen. It will not display anything.
So you really should initialize every element in that array.
Yep.
Otherwise you can't get into it.
Yep.
Rather than if you
So, yep. So you have to, because you are handling a data and you're using arrays. So you have to assign those values to array in order to build your logic. If arrays are empty, then nothing will happen. Okay. Now coming to this code, and this code is very helpful for you in doing your assessment. Let me first run this program and tell you what this program is doing. Is it getting recorded? Yes. So this is a product details form, and you can see that I have multiple fields on this form. I have product ID, I have price 1, price 2 and price 3, then I have product 2, and then I have product 3. Okay. In similar fashion, you have fields on your form that you are using in your assessment. Okay. And if I submit this, it will print me something like this. Total number of products are 3, and then the information that was entered. Now if I go to the program logic, first of all, we use two-dimensional array in order to capture this information. Okay. So there were 4 columns and 20 rows. Okay. I defined 4 by 20 two-dimensional array. You can also define 20 by 4. So it's up to you how you basically can better manage it. And then if you see over here, we are dynamically generating an index for array. Okay. So what I'm doing over here, if you look over here, product the way form is designed, it's basically that each product starts with this product ID, but they are differentiated on the basis of their index. So for example, first field have name product ID underscore 1, second product have name product ID underscore 2, and so on. Okay. So if I have designed a form in this fashion, then I am able to capture this information in arrays on the next form. So how am I doing that? Basically, first of all, I define two-dimensional array. Okay. So few variables were defined about the maximum product count and so on. So over here, I am basically accessing, trying to assign this value, which is, now request.form is also an array. When form is being submitted, the data is basically passed to this page in a form of array. Okay, and request.form itself an array. So what I am trying to do is, I am trying to build an index for this array to retrieve a value. So I know that every product ID is starting with this information. Okay, only I is being, only the integer at the end is differentiating them. So using this I variable, I am trying to generate dynamically an index for this array, which will give me product ID for product 1, 2, 3 and so on, and I am storing that information into this array, which is product array. It's column 0, and then according to row 1, row 2, row 3 and so on, all the information will be saved in this two-dimensional array. Okay. There is also code, similar code in PHP, and you can see over here I am doing the same thing by using a count variable over here, which is basically generating an index dynamically. So product ID 1, product ID 2, product ID 3 and 4 and so on, they will be generated dynamically in this case. Okay. So look at these examples, run them, and if you have any questions, you can post them on Blackboard or you can send me an email. Okay.
Sorry, whereabouts are those examples posted on Blackboard?
Yeah. So now we will just summarize what we've covered so far. So we discussed arrays in detail, and we saw that how they are helpful in various scenarios, and when we are searching them, what are the important considerations we have to take into account, and especially in terms of their efficiency especially when we are traversing big arrays. Okay. And we have to be very careful how loops are initialized and what are the conditions on which we are making taking decisions, and Parallel arrays provide a solution when we have multiple items and multiple attributes of those items. In those scenarios, we can use parallel arrays, and associative arrays is a sort of parallel array. Okay, but in that case, we are using a key value combination. But you can also define multi-dimensional array. And for loops are very critical, especially when you are traversing the array, because in for loops you know when your loop end. Okay, if you know when your loop end, it means you know the bounds of your array, and you can better manipulate that information. Okay. That's it for today. So if you have any question, I'm happy to answer that. Otherwise, I will see you in the lab. And regarding your assessment, one thing I want to clarify, that a couple of students emailed me about confusion with PHP and ASP.NET. In your assessment, give me 1 minute more. If you go to one thing, that your assessment is due by next week. Okay, so keep that in mind. And secondly, you have to basically implement your logic in PHP as well as in ASP.NET using C# or VB.NET. Okay. When you will this form, which is Olympic form.aspx.html, you will use this form in your Visual Studio.NET. You will add this form into your Visual Studio.NET, and you will code the entire logic to validate the information and process it and display the report. And you will use this form in XAMPP, and you will create a PHP file in XAMPP, and you will basically run that PHP file in XAMPP environment. Okay, XAMPP is for PHP, and Visual Studio is for ASP.NET.
Found 2 errors in the Olympic form. Would I clarify?
That was the field name.
The one?
Yeah.
Pseudo is spelled wrong in one place as well.
That's fine. Those are minor things. You can do. In fact, I updated and uploaded the form again. Okay. So if it is writing the field name, you can change it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's it. See you in the lab then. Oh, yeah.
I just noticed there was a couple of slides in your lecture that were
Yeah.
made in the latest PDF.
Yeah, I have uploaded the PDF.
Okay,
If you download now, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have updated it.
Thank you.
Okay then. Thank you very much. See you in the lab.